Hello, beautiful community. This week I had the fire going in the shed. It's been very cold this winter, and of course I went outside to get some firewood, and I've got a couple of piles of wood just outside the shed. One of them is wood that I've been drying. I've cut up and I've sealed the ends of them, and they've been drying for a little while. I'll usually dry them for a year or two and then bring them into the shed. I've got some maple there, a bit of yellow box, some mistletoe and some shea oak. So I've got a few different varieties, and I've also got a pile of firewood, and usually it's a bit of pine or some old bits of wood that I don't think will be any good for turning. And I picked up a small piece and I thought it was too good for the fire, so I put it onto the lathe and started turning it down. So I reckon the wood's Manna gum. I got some Manna gum a year or two ago from the Ballarat area, and I know I sealed the ends of the Manna gum with a green paint, but this one didn't have any paint on it, so I'm not sure whether I didn't think it was any good and put it into the firewood section, or I didn't put as much paint on it and it soaked in. So I turned it down using a roughing gouge and then cut it into two, so I had a bigger bit and a smaller bit, and it wasn't until I cut it down to a cylinder that I thought I'd make a bird out of it. And I'd seen a couple of examples of the birds on Pinterest and a few of those sort of sites, and I think that the night before I must have seen a couple of birds, and I thought I'll try that. So the Manna gum was a nice piece to try. It's a soft wood, it turns very well, and I've used it a couple of times, and I like the wood, but it's a little bit plain, doesn't have much character to it. But after turning this one down with the roughing gouge, I found that there was some colour between the juvenile wood, or the heartwood, and the sapwood, and there was a small band of red colour, and I was hoping that I'd be able to keep some of that when I turned it down. I'm not sure how that happened, whether there was an event at some stage when the tree was growing which caused that. Hopefully someone might be able to enlighten me in the comments as to what they think it was. But once I was turning it down, I was able to keep some of it. So I started turning the body down using the spindle gouge. That's the 1/2 inch spindle gouge that I normally turn, and it was cutting the wood quite nicely. And it's interesting, I'm not sure if you do the same thing, but when you're turning, you'd usually turn the way you always turn. I don't think too much about it. I'm just trying to get the wood off and make it as smooth as possible. But once I was watching the video, it's amazing how many times you turn the spindle gouge to match the wood or match the shape. And as I was watching it, I was going down the body of the bird or body of the wood, and the blade was always touching the wood at some part of the blade. It was always cutting, and it's interesting to see that the spindle turns to the form of the wood, but it's always cutting. Well, that fascinated me. More so that you do it subconsciously, and I suppose that practice and over time you get to learn that moving the spindle at different angles gives you the best results. So that really fascinated me, that one. Anyway, I digress, but I got the body down to a shape that I liked. I sanded it off a little bit and then used the Triple E grit. I haven't used that for a while, but I used the Triple E grit and then some wax and polish. And the wood, even though it's reasonably soft, it certainly polished off very nicely. Got the smaller piece of wood and put it into the lathe and turned it down using the roughing gouge, and then used the 1/2 inch spindle gouge again. It took me a little while to get it right. I didn't want the head to be too big or too small. It had to be just right, just like Goldilocks. It took me a little while to get it to a shape that I liked. Again, I gave it a bit of a sand and finished it off with Triple E grit and the wax and polish. And once I'd finished it, I realised that the coloration that I had talked about between the juvenile wood and the sapwood, there were still parts of it still left. I hadn't turned all of it off, and you wouldn't believe it, it looked on the body, it looked like wings, and on the head it looked like eyes. And I reckon if I had tried 100 million times to try and do that, I would never be able to do it. But as luck would have it, when you look at it, it does look like a bird with wings and two eyes, just with that coloration. So I didn't have to add that. That was just part of the wood. And I suppose I shouldn't be saying I'm lucky. I should have said I meant to do it, but no, it was only luck. To put it together, drilled a couple of holes and then stuck a toothpick and joined the head and the body together. So it was a lovely project, this one. I enjoyed it. And I ended up later that day, I found a bit more firewood. I reckon it was the same type of wood. I reckon it was Manna, and I did a couple of ducks. I used a bit of elm for the head, and that came up quite nicely as well. But I like this one, and I might do a couple more. I reckon that'd be a good project to sell at markets. So I'll be probably back at a market before Christmas. So between now and then, I'll have to make a few more. But I think originally I was going to use this bit of wood for a pencil box. I've still got to do some pencil boxes for the cook for her Christmas presents. And I've done a few, but I reckon I've got to do a few more. I'll have to find out how many she actually wants. So I digressed a little bit, making pencil boxes, and I'm glad I did because the bird certainly come up quite nicely. Anyway, I hope you enjoy this video. I'll see you next time. Cheerio.